Nearly 6 months after its launch, Forza Horizon 5 is still really fun to play and is one of my favorite racing games of recent memory. While it may be the best looking Forza title to date, Playground Games has made improvements to their overall handling model, which is most noticeable when using a wheel and pedal setup. They've improved their overall audio quality and accuracy, and they've given us the largest map in a Forza title to date. The positive reviews that this title received are still very much accurate to the experience, but this isn't actually what I'm here to talk about. Instead, I want to construct a list of ideas and thoughts that I think fit into the realm of constructive criticism, and find some areas that I think this title and future titles can be improved. This list is also not exhaustive by any means. There are many other points worth talking about that I have seen mentioned elsewhere. Perhaps we can get to those another time. Also, as of this point when I'm recording this, no DLC has been announced. So, with all that said, let's go ahead and hop into this. It's no secret at this point that the story of the Forza Horizon games is virtually non-existent, and what is there tends to be a little more campy, lighthearted, and sometimes really over the top. Instead of a structured narrative, the story elements present in the game are all disconnected from one another, while serving as a loose justification to drive a pre-selected car against the clock, and completing virtually the same point-to-point race-to-the-destination type missions over and over again, albeit sometimes it concludes in different ways, with you taking a certain photo, getting a certain amount of skill points, or just beating an AI opponent across the finish line. Accompanying you in many of these missions are characters that add little to no substance to what is actually happening on screen, although some dialogue is present to provide the player with some kind of history of a certain vehicle or monument, but all of these details become lost and buried under a mountain of checklists, accolades, and other items that show up on the map that bombard the player. This is all to say that, as I found myself digging into different areas of this game, I found the story content to be by far the least exciting or interesting content to experience. But it doesn't have to be this way. The game presents the player character as a superstar of the Horizon Festival, continuing the through line of the previous Horizon titles and serving as the main justification for receiving vehicles, money, and events faster than you can possibly handle. The issue with this is that being referred to as a superstar right from the beginning can be a little confusing for new players and, in my opinion, removes a lot of the motivation to engage with the story content in the first place, as this is never really addressed in any meaningful way. Personally, I think that Playground Games could reframe the player character as a rookie at a new version of the festival, and that they have arrived to prove themselves to new, fresh competition. Showcase races can be held against top-tier AI drivers in different classes, and in a wide assortment of vehicles and scenarios to keep the content fresh and exciting. I also personally like the idea of the player choosing between 3 lower-class vehicles, having only access to D or C-class cars, and lower-tier events right from the start, instead of giving you a supercar right within the first few seconds of starting the game. Parts and upgrades would also be earned as players complete races in both story and online modes, as well as money and reputation being earned in different classes and race disciplines. Lacking from the world are dedicated raceways that mimic the look and feel of actual race courses for both road and dirt style events. There could be a story path where, as you rank up, showcase races are held on dedicated raceways for different disciplines. The tracks themselves, the stands, the surrounding buildings, and architecture can be old and overrun with grass and plants. The better you do, attendance goes up, and you begin to see improvements to the stadium's aesthetics until the final version is all lit up and packed with people. Having these courses in different sections of the world can draw large groups of players to these main events. Each stadium would only rank up as you raced in those arenas and would operate independently of your player level. These would not replace the current system we have now, but rather just add on another level of racing and interaction with the world. Ultimately, the feedback loop reinforces that the better you become, the more access you get to longer events, faster cars, better parts, and bigger rewards. The story can establish that there are rival racers that you must beat, and are all trying to establish themselves as the next Horizon superstars. This gives players recognizable names as they progress through the story, and the game could keep track of wins and losses across all of the story races so they know who to watch out for on the track. In summary, the story can be a combination of elements that reinforce the core gameplay of car culture and racing. As of now, the story content doesn't serve to be as much of a companion to the core gameplay, but rather feels like more of an obstacle or just some side content. Embedding the content within the world and making it feel like you were actively working towards something, like leveling your driver, getting to the next class of cars or parts, or unlocking different sections of the map, make the player feel better about doing the content in the first place, and I believe enhances the overall experience. Somewhat related to the story content I just spoke about, I also wanted to talk briefly about the AI system being used in both the Horizon and Motorsport series. Now, I'm not going to dive into the Motorsport series in this video, but both Playground Games and Turn 10 use a system called the Drivatar system for their AI drivers, and they claim that it uses player inputs from other real races to determine the AI behavior. I would love to see Playground Games address some of the strange behavior seen out on the track, seemingly breaking the laws of physics while cornering at unbelievable speeds and completely ignoring the driving lines and checkpoints to win races. I would love to see more of a focus on the AI model to better represent how drivers in different skill levels would actually drive, and this would change based on the vehicle type. The rubber banding in this game can be really aggressive against player drivers, leading to some situations where an AI driver is able to catch up from really far back in the pack, only to catch and then pass the first place driver just before the finish line. In a case where a player crashes their car, sometimes the AI will actually respond by coming to a complete stop in the middle of a roadway. This is really wild looking as you come up over a hill only to see about 7 AI drivers at a dead stop, waiting for you to catch up, just to resume the race. As with previous Forza titles, the AI in this game seems to behave erratically, is completely unpredictable, does very little to avoid contact with players, and doesn't seem to follow the same guidelines and physics that the player does. I would really love to see Playground Games take steps to improve how the AI drives across the board to make for better, more realistic racing. While Forza Horizon 5 is not a fully fledged RPG, players are allowed and encouraged to customize their characters, vehicles, clothing, license plates, and their entire style of play. Unfortunately, the base character creation tool is really lackluster, using mostly the same base models, hairstyles, and clothing as previous titles. We are coming to a point where character customization can be really good, and studios are fully capable of providing high-quality character models that allow players to represent themselves in a variety of different ways. I would love to see Playground invest a little more time and resources into a robust character creation tool, especially since the car customization tools are fairly impressive, at least when it comes to painting. As mentioned previously, Playground Games has introduced quite a few features that allow players to customize different areas of the game to their liking. It really is pretty easy to set up a party, choose from a variety of vehicles, create an event, and then get right into a race. The game is pretty good about automatically setting up an event based on the car type and class that you are driving when you start the race, but if you feel like tuning the experience in any number of ways, this is where you'll want to look into the blueprint system. At its most basic, the blueprint system allows a player to pick a track from the map and alter the details like race restrictions, car manufacturers, car class, weather, and so on. This feature really begins to open up once you begin to explore the track creator options, which is a set of tools that allows a player to take an existing starting location and set an entirely new route for players and AI to follow. Everything is included here, allowing players who want to dig in really deep to fully decorate the track to their liking, using signage, foliage, barriers, and all sorts of other obstacles. The player is also responsible for placing checkpoints and creating the driving line that helps the AI and other players navigate this new course. It sounds like a lot, and it is, and I do believe that there are some new ways of streamlining this process and improving the overall experience. First, in order to create your track, you must first choose an existing starting line from which to build your track. This means that you can't just drop a starting line anywhere on the map and create the route that you think will work well. You are completely restricted to the existing starting points provided to you by Playground Games. Second, is that not only are you restricted to the existing starting lines, you also cannot use a point-to-point starting line if you wish to create a circuit-style course. This means that there are entire sections of the map that shorter circuit-style courses are impossible to create because there are no existing circuit-style races to build from. There is surely a better way to utilize the existing map and allow players to create and expand on what is already available here. Third, once you are actually inside of the route creation tool, the game expects you to do everything in one pass. They have made it so that you can pause, add walls and signage at any point while you are creating your race, but it can be very difficult to accurately set up a driving line while also being forced to essentially pause the game every few seconds just to place your checkpoints. Across the board, there are changes that could be made to the system to enable creators to make the courses they want and make the entire experience better for future racers. For starters, enable players to drop a starting line anywhere on the map. We don't necessarily have to talk about the specifics of how this would work, but having access to a special toolset, say, inside of the drone mode, could give players greater flexibility when setting up new courses. Open the tool, choose the track editor, and drop the starting line that shows the arrow pointing in the direction that the race would start. Also, allowing them to place checkpoints using the asset browser would eliminate the need to set up a driving line and place checkpoints at the same time. Another way to do this would be to simply let the player create the driving line, and then when the track is complete, a prompt would ask the player to place the checkpoints. The checkpoints would snap to the drive line, and you could choose how to offset the flags and scale any distance between them. These are just a few ideas that in practice may create a few extra steps, but I think it would make setting up custom routes a little easier. This has been a lot for just one feature, and obviously there are many other improvements that could be made here to give the blueprint system a makeover and give creators the tools needed to make the best possible courses, and Playground Games has taken steps to make the tools more powerful than ever before, but as always, there is room for improvement. Currently, the online racing experience is an unpredictable and often very frustrating endeavor. From cheaters to metatunes to rammers, the online experience can go from exciting high-speed racing that comes down to a photo finish to a painfully slow race as every corner on a given track becomes a demolition derby-style free-for-all. Some weekly challenges require a team of 6 human drivers compete and win against 6 unbeatable AI drivers. In these events, some players will become a target of rammers and other drivers struggling with road rage who are on the same team. The idea that some people will sacrifice a team win for a personal win is strange, but all too familiar for just about anyone who has ever hopped online for a few of these challenges. There may be ways to target these bad practices and improve the overall racing experience for everyone. Now, despite everything I have said in this video so far, as it turns out, I'm not some expert driver. I do, however, pride myself on being able to hold my own without ramming or resorting to a classic Forza handbrake into 90-degree turn and using my teammates as a buffer type maneuver. As I see it, ranked game modes could help alleviate bad drivers from an otherwise skillful racing series. Finding ways to incentivize good clean racing by awarding medals to drivers with clean lap times and fast times could increase the quality of driving. Players could also be incentivized to give awards to fellow racers in post-race screens for clean racing and good sportsmanship. Those who want to continue to ram and cause chaos can certainly do so, but would eventually end up in lobbies with drivers that share those same sentiments. This isn't a perfect system, but I think incentivizing players to race clean, or setting up a system to push layers into lobbies with others that tend towards similar playstyles would benefit the game overall. Personally, I love the absolute absurdity of options for tuning vehicles into much higher classes than they have any right to be. Players can exchange and upgrade engines, transmissions, tires, and a host of other parts, turning an otherwise very slow vehicle into a racing monster. The issue, though, is that opening up all of these options creates balancing issues between hundreds of vehicles and thousands of tuning options. My solution to this is to overhaul the ranking system for vehicles. Instead of using the D500, C600, B700, and so on, divide the ranks up into 50, so you would have 2 ranks for D in 500 and 550, and 2 ranks for C in 600 and 650, and so on. We could also create vehicle classifications which would function similar to loadouts in first-person shooters. Basically, the idea here is to keep vehicles with off-road tires out of high-speed road races, and keep players from using exploits to outmuscle opponents using actual street or race tunes and parts. The idea isn't to punish those who want to experiment, but rather to keep online races close and competitive. The last big point I wanted to raise is that while the game was praised at launch for its visual and audio design, as well as the implementation of accessibility options for the players who need them, the launch of the game itself was unstable, to put it mildly. The game released in a state that left players unable to connect with friends, and some completely unable to connect to the servers at all. Bugs prevented players from completing story events, unlocking and completing accolades, and completing daily and weekly challenges. Some players were experiencing full game crashes in the garage while tuning, painting, and customizing their cars. The list continues on. Forza Horizon 5 has also had its fair share of problems with cheaters. They are rampant on the leaderboards for rival events, they exist in Eliminator and Playground Games events, they show up all the way down to the little PR stunts that are littered throughout the map. The point here is that while there's a lot to like with Forza Horizon 5, the launch was marred with problems that soured the entire experience for many players. As with seemingly every game releasing these days, Forza Horizon 5 was not left in the oven long enough to cook all the way through, and what we were left with is something that tastes pretty good around the edges, but once we get into the core of the whole experience, it all just kind of falls apart. This is a little surprising considering how many of the ingredients were seemingly carried over from Forza Horizon 4. I would personally like to see the future games in this series spend a little more time in development to avoid a lot of the headaches players have encountered thus far, ensuring that if we are given a task list of hundreds of items, that we can reliably complete those items without constantly checking the revamped forums to ensure that others aren't experiencing something similar. At the end of the day, Playground Games has set up this franchise to be easily accessible for newcomers to the racing genre. The visuals are always well done, the overall presentation is handled well, the showcase races are over the top but can be a nice change of pace from the standard racing events, and there are plenty of achievements, accolades, and features to keep players busy for a while. While a vast majority of this video is a critique of the game and its systems, I do still genuinely have fun in the world that Playground Games has provided. I think adding some deeper character and vehicle customization options would go a long way. Refreshing the AI would make the racing itself feel more realistic and satisfying, and creating a story that adds more layers to the interaction with the world and the NPCs would provide new life for this series. I really do look forward to whatever Playground Games gives us next, given that the next big game is Fable, but I really love this series, and I want to continue to see it grow. Hey there, post-production editor version of me here. I wanted to jump in and make one last quick point before I close this video out for good. While this game has suffered its fair share of issues, plenty of which I've tried to cover in this video, if someone were to ask me to sell them on this game, or this series, I would point them to the fact that no other racing games do the online co-op experience quite like this game does, if at all. The ease of setting up events and just playing with your friends is pretty much unrivaled here. This game truly shines when it comes to fun co-op racing experiences. Also, it's available on Game Pass, so the entry requirements for playing this game are pretty low to begin with. So, that's actually the end of the video, officially. A sincere thanks to anyone who has made it this far. Feel free to voice any opinions down in the comments, as I know there are many differing thoughts on how this series should be handled moving forward. So, thanks again for your time, and I'll see you online. Take care.